This time on Past Deadline. This week's news in 60 seconds, and a conversation with Associate Editor Andrew Mullen and staff reporter Tess DeGayner on their coverage of COVID-19. I'm your host, podcast editor Ben Ackley, and this is Past Deadline, your behind-the-scenes look at Central Michigan life. Here's this week's news in 60 seconds. On August 6th, CMU launched a public safety app as an extension of the Central Alert System. The app, called Rave Guardian, allows users to receive information and chat directly with the CMU Police Department and Office of Civil Rights and Institutional Equity. In addition to the chat features, the app also enables users to set a safety timer when walking on campus, instantly share location, personal identification, and emergency contacts with CMU PD dispatchers, call CMU PD for emergencies and non-emergencies directly from the app, as well as opt into weather alerts and central alerts based on location. The app also features a call and content directory of campus resources like CMU Health, the Counseling Center, and Sexual Aggression Peer Advocates, or SAPA. On August 28th, Travis Russell Morrison was arrested and lodged at the Isabella County Jail. The 31-year-old St. John's man, who was arraigned that afternoon, was charged with aggravated indecent exposure, 2 counts of indecent exposure, 2 counts of disturbing the peace, and 2 counts of disorderly person obscene conduct. On August 27th, between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. in parking lot 22, the man reportedly pulled up next to students in a goldish-brown sedan and exposed himself before driving off. After being put on administrative leave June 26th, Journalism Department Chair Tim Boudreau is no longer employed by Central Michigan University. In June, Boudreau was put on paid administrative leave following the release of a video on Instagram of him saying a racial slur during a media law class lecture about the 1993 lawsuit between CMU and fired men's basketball coach Keith Dambreau. The words Boudreau was recorded saying during the lecture were the comments made by Dambreau to the team, not Boudreau's own. Up next, we talk to Associate Editor Andrew Mullen and staff reporter Tess DeGayner about their experiences covering COVID-19 for this week's issue. I'm here with Associate Editor Andrew Mullen and staff reporter Tess DeGayner to talk a little bit about their COVID coverage thus far this year. So I just want to thank y'all, first of all, for coming in and talking to me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why not? All right, I'll go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Mullen. Like Ben said, I'm an associate editor here at Central Michigan Life. I am kind of been in charge of running COVID coverage and eventually election coverage as well, so stay tuned for that. And you might also recognize my voice from another podcast here at Central Michigan Life, Soundcheck, which you can check out, I believe, every Wednesday this semester, starting next week. So keep an ear out for that as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tess DeGayner. I'm a staff reporter with Central Michigan Life. This semester, I'll be doing a lot of COVID coverage with Andrew, and I will probably get into more enterprise pieces later this semester.
All right. Thanks again, guys, for coming on. So I think we'll just get right into it from that. Everybody knows me, or should at this point. So first of all, can you each just describe the big COVID-related stories you've been working on recently?
Sure, I will start that then. I had the cover edition this past today, actually. I actually have a copy right here. It's just kind of getting the voice of students, kind of getting their thoughts about the whole reopening plan. I've also been doing a lot of case count updates, like saying, here's the number currently, here's what the university's reporting, here's what the county's reporting. They are slightly different. We'll get into that later if you so want to. And I also did a story about I think it was published, I want to say last week. I don't know, time is so ridiculously crazy to me right now. I can't keep track of it, but I think it was last week we published a story about faculty and what their experiences have been like so far. So those have been recently some of the big COVID stories that I've done.
Yeah, and tomorrow, or probably shouldn't date it. I have a story coming out about how seniors are feeling as the fall semester begins. I've noticed that seniors sort of have a unique stance with everything going on right now because they've experienced what CMU was like pre-pandemic, and now as everything starts to unfold and we're open, everyone's back, they've sort of realized how CMU can improve, and they've offered their perspective on how they've experienced this pandemic on campus so far.
All right. I just had a quick question about that seniors article that's coming out, Tess. How did you source the senior sources for your article?
Yeah, well, as a senior myself, I thought it was important to get both sides of the perspective, as you might say. Some people are really happy to be back on campus, and that's what they had hoped CMU would call over the summer, that we would return on campus, sort of a business per usual. But there's also the other side of things, like they believe that there could be either different protocols, or the protocols should be altered a little bit better to fit the students' needs. So I was able to go out and ask my friends, hey, do you know someone who has either strong feelings either way about this? And I had interviewed some freshmen as well, which the story didn't wrap up to be. So I kind of just went around campus, gauging where people were at. And then I'd reached out to friends of friends and seeing if anyone would be willing to share their perspective with me.
All right, cool. Now, Andrew, you mentioned that you wrote this week's cover story. This comes out Friday, so it's the cover that came out yesterday. I just wanted to ask you a few questions. First, a question about that story in specific, and then a question about writing cover stories in general, because I know it's not your first. First of all, how'd you find sources for your story? Was it similar to Tess's?
Yeah, I was just kind of walking around campus and just talking to people, and I know that can be a little nerve-wracking, especially someone, who may not be a reporter. It's like, oh my God, going out and talking to people right now. Because, COVID and whatnot. And obviously, yes, you want to make sure that you're, following, safety protocols. I stayed at least, try to stay 6 feet between people when I talk to them. I put a mask on and whatnot when I talk. So, it can't be a little nerve-wracking in that sense, but I think it's really important just to go out and talk to people, because it's one of the best ways to get sources, to get anecdotes, especially for stories like these. Well, the whole point of it was trying to give a voice to students, trying to hear what they have to say about reopening plan thus far. And it's not one of my favorite things to do. Funny enough, I can kind of be naturally introverted. I don't like just going up to talking to people and like, hey, what do you think about this? It's not my a particular cup of tea. But again, especially for when you're trying to get a large number of voices in there, it's one of the best things to do. The issue, and we might get into this later, I was finding into was trying to get like a diverse range of views, because a lot of people I spoke to were, again, people who were just kind of out and about on campus. They were throwing a football around, or they were walking down the sidewalks. A lot of those people who are kind of walking around and feel more comfortable doing that are probably going to have more of a positive view on things right now. They might not be as concerned as other students are, which is fine. I mean, that's what they think. That's what they think. It's just, trying to get that, trying to okay, let's go further. It's trying to get more of that, diversity of, opinions. This kind of was the issue. So I had to make some calls as well for it. I know I think the girl that I cite first, my story, she reached out to us through email, and I kind of followed up with her on that. So it was just mainly just going up to students and talking to them. But there was a bit of extra points from here to there as well.
All right. And we'll definitely talk about sort of the feeling that you're getting on campus, stuff like that. But before we get there, I do want to ask just more of a personal behind the scenes question to you, Andrew, which is, how do you feel when you're writing a cover story? Do you feel like there's a lot of pressure on something like that?
Yes, there definitely is some added pressure to that. My first cover story, which was about a local bar and music venue in town called Rebels, used to be called Tom's Foolery. It was about that kind of the history of this place and a lot of cool, bands that I really like that played there. And I wrote that when I was like my first semester here at CM Life. I was just a freshman at that point, and I was I really didn't know it at the time, but it's, as I've gone through CM Life, I understand the journalism world more. I understand CM Life a lot more now, of course. Cover stories take a lot of work, not just in the time, they're typically longer, they're enterprise, not just in the time of reporting and writing, but also now there's a component of, okay, someone has to design, the cover, someone has to, make the spread look nice, and try to, there's usually extra art involved. There's a multimedia component to it. It's stressful, especially as someone now who's an editor, and I kind of help making sure this semester, one of my duties is to help to make sure cover stories get together. It's trying to make sure everything gets done before, a certain time. Like, we always want done. Granted, it didn't happen with this one, because there's a last minute change up, but you want to try to have that story done kind of like a week before we want to start, designing stuff. So we have time to, get design ideas ready, so we have time to get art. So we have time to come up with, maybe video or multimedia with it. So yeah, there's an extra, I suppose you can say, amount of, stress and, involved with it because of, you have to get it done, a certain time beforehand, and yeah, you want to make sure. I mean, if it's going on a cover, it's an enterprise. It's a cool feature. It's a really important piece of journalism. Not to say if it isn't a cover, it isn't important. So of course not. But you want to make sure you get it right. So yeah, I guess that question is a pretty valid one. It can be a little more stressful at times.
All right. So back to the COVID. We'll start with Tess on this one. But I'm asking this of both of you. You've obviously talked to a lot of students. Andrew, you've talked to faculty as well. Is there a general feeling that you're getting on campus? Be it one of, sort of nonchalant, or be it more concerned? Is there a specific feeling or vibe you're getting more so from the students or more so from the faculty?
Yeah, it's hard to generalize it right now because, believe it or not, it's still very new and everyone's adjusting each and every day. Something changes, whether that be the number of cases or the way their professor is now adjusting their class. So I would say, based on the story that I wrote, that people are just concerned. They're concerned for their health. They're concerned for their environment. They're concerned for their friends. And there's a lot of uncertainty. I know we've heard that word a lot during this pandemic, but we're still at that point where this is a whole new phase in our lives during this unprecedented event. And people are concerned for their experience and what that's going to mean each time they wake up in the morning.
Andrew, what's the general feeling you've gotten here on campus?
I think it's been kind of a mix, and I know Tess mentioned it earlier, as far as seniors seem to be a little more, I guess we could say, teed off with the university as far as how things have been handled, because they know how things have been run in the past, and compared to right now. And then freshmen, they might not know as much, and that's of course not a slight on them. That's just experiences are experiences, and I think generally I talk to people who live on campus, people lower classmen. I talk to number of juniors, but I didn't really talk to any seniors. So I think Tess's point is a pretty valid one. That's what I've gotten. It's also been surprisingly mixed. I mean, I was expecting, talking to a lot of kids who are like, oh, this university is fumbling around. This isn't going to work, but actually, I found it more the other case. At least, again, like I said earlier, kids walking around a campus, the kids, still kind of hanging out with each other. They're concerned. They're worried about going all online. They're wondering, they're not happy with the partying, that's for sure. That was definitely a common theme, that they're not for, the parties happening, in places like Deerfield Apartments or, what we saw on Welcome Weekend. But a lot of them were like, I was excited to come back, even if they were nervous in some way. I was excited. I wanted to come back. I like in-person learning. Or, some of them is like, I actually kind of like the high flex model because I can go to class when I'm not, because I can just choose to stay home and take it online when I'm not feeling well, or when, or if I just simply just don't want to leave my apartment or whatnot, so. There have been students who are surprisingly still kind of optimistic about this, still trying to find, some happiness, in all this uncertainty, as Tess said. And the only other real common thread that I actually heard from a lot of students, and I imagine we can all probably attest this to somewhat, is kind of the atmosphere on campus, particularly, walking on the sidewalks. What's different now? And it's like, yeah, well, it's a lot emptier. It's not as many students just out and about now, and I've seen that too. I'm walking down, Moore Hall, even like during times where, there should be a lot of students come out of classes and it's just not there. It's just the hallways are empty, sidewalks are empty. And I think that was expressed through a lot of people that I talked to.
All right. Is there anyone that either of you have talked to that has seemed entirely unbothered, just living as if this was another year?
I wouldn't say so. Everyone that I talked to had brought up something that is new or something that they've had to adjust to. I wouldn't say like an obstacle, but just a change that hasn't happened before, and they're now finding a new game plan to tackle it. So I wouldn't say anyone's unbothered. I think everyone recognizes differently on different levels, but people are recognizing what's going on, whether that be the cases, changes on campus, just how they've had to adjust their schedules. So whether people are necessarily upset or not, people are noticing the difference, if that makes sense.
Andrew?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I mean, most students that I talked to, at least had some concern with, whether it be about, about reverting to all online classes. And again, I talked to this one girl outside of Meyer, and she was like, yeah, I'm worried about, maybe even if, I'm sure she was worried about the definitely case numbers and disease before, but she signed up for all online classes. All high flex classes, so she can take them in person. And she was worried about most of them have already gone online. I don't want to go back all online across the school because it's just not the way she learns. There was these two transfer students I talked to, and they seemed pretty happy to be here. They're still, they're worried about trying to find stuff to do, during this time. I think they said, but even then they said, yeah, we have plans to go tubing or kayaking, down the Chippewa River. So they seemed pretty optimistic about the whole thing. But even then, I wouldn't say that, I think every student probably has something that they're worried about, whether it's, the kind of, the quote unquote trivial stuff, what am I going to do for fun? What am I going to do to pass the time when I'm up here? When you can't party, when you can't, do a lot of things that's usually here. It's up to the point of I talked to a girl who said she was concerned about going to the cafeteria or leaving her dorm because she's afraid of getting the virus. So I think there's a pretty big range there, but I think everyone still has something to worry about.
All right. As a bit of a closer for both of you, and in relation to concerns, do either of you have any concerns about doing your jobs here at CM Life during all of this? And Tess, we'll start with you.
Okay. I don't necessarily have any concern about doing my job. My concern is the message that I'm presenting to our students, because as we've touched on a little bit, people are feeling this pandemic on a spectrum, whether they're really concerned, not concerned, in between. So I guess as far as my job goes, the way I do it, I have options. I can do it remotely. I can walk around on campus safely at 6 feet apart distance, wearing a mask, stuff like that. So I think that my biggest concern is getting the whole picture for the student body and the rest of our audience at the paper, because I think it's really important now. And I've sort of noticed that other groups of people are, kind of looking for representation throughout this time. So I guess it's just my concern going forward, and what I hope my sort of goal is to represent the picture as well as I can and represent individuals who I interview as best as I can.
Andrew?
Obviously that's probably up there, trying to make sure that we're getting, a wide variety of student voices in here. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, we wanted to do stories, talking to seniors, talking to, just students in general living on campus, trying to get their voice in there. We want to, and that's the issue, trying to balance, like I said earlier, going up and talking to people in person with, also trying to be safe, because when I took my internship this summer at MLive, they were I think I covered half of a protest, and I interviewed a restaurant owner in person. That was the only face-to-face interactions I was having with people as far as reporting goes this summer. It was with that, and I was there for 3 months, so everything else was done either over Zoom or through phone calls. And I mean, it's there. They're not terrible. I mean, you can still do good interviews just fine through them. But only doing that to me is how am I finding stories? How am I really connecting with people? How am I connecting with sources? It's tough. And, for what I've told reporters is, please be safe. Please, if you think that you don't really need to go, in person to interview them, don't. You just do it over phone. But still go out and talk to people. Still go out and find those stories and sources so you can, do those stories. So, there is a balance there. I guess my biggest concern is trying to keep that balance, and obviously I don't want to, I'd like to go, home this weekend for Labor Day to get some stuff, see my family again, and I don't want to bring anything back to them. So, it's just trying to keep that balance there. I think is my biggest concern.
All right. I think that's about it. Thank you guys very much for coming on and taking some time out of your days.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Past Deadline, a production of the CM Life podcast division. Every story referenced in this episode can be found at our website, cm-life.com. To keep up with us, follow us on social media at Central Michigan Life on Instagram, at CM Life on Twitter, or follow the Central Michigan Life Facebook page. I've been your host, podcast editor Ben Ackley, and this has been Past Deadline. Until next week, so long and stay informed.